Welcome, everybody, to the JMO Podcast. I'm your producer, Taylor Michaels, and on this episode, we get to know multi-species fishing pro John Hoyer. Now, John's putting together a great career as a professional walleye tournament fisherman, muskie, bass, you name it. If it swims, John probably knows how to catch it. And John's passion and knowledge for fishing is just undeniable when you listen to his stories and insights of his very own career. The best part is, if you're just getting to know John for the first time, he's going to be a fantastic ambassador in this industry for many, many years to come. There's a lot you can take away from John's perspective on fishing, no matter where you're from or what it is that you like to fish for.
The JMO Podcast is sponsored by Long Haul Trucking. Long Haul Trucking is looking for skilled professional CDL drivers to join their team. Long Haul values their drivers and shippers like nobody else. Their employee-owned ESOP structure has them leading the industry in pay and benefits, geared towards long-term success and growth for company drivers and owner-operators. Long Haul is a people-first company, and it shows. They take pride in giving their drivers an opportunity to have a fulfilling career along with a healthy, happy life on the home front. If you're a professional CDL driver, get a hold of Long Haul at 1-800-255-5153 or look them up online at longhaultrucking.com. Long Haul, running on the power of promises kept.
John, super cool to meet you, man. Thanks for sitting down and spending some time with us here on the podcast. Maybe just to get to know you a little bit, talk to us, tell us a little bit about John Hoyer, the fisherman.
Yeah, that's funny. It's great to meet you too. Let's see, who am I? I guess I'd fancy myself a complete multi-species angler. I really kind of progressed in my fishing career to the point where I understand that it's really just the stuff leading up to any fishing tournament or fishing adventure, and it doesn't matter what species it is. So I get the same excitement out of fishing for crappies, fishing for muskies, a muskie tournament, a bass tournament, a walleye tournament. So yeah, I guess that's kind of what I pride myself on, is being this like mature person now, where I realize like all the intangibles of fishing is what makes it so enjoyable. And really that's been my MO my whole life, like fishing number one thing. So right now I'm fishing the National Walleye Tour on the walleye side, and I still dabble with muskie tournaments whenever they line up with my walleye schedule. So I was able to fish one last year, the PMTT Mega, and we were lucky enough to win that one. And that was the first one I fished in maybe 2 years. So same thing going forward this year again. Couple muskie tournaments, 4 big walleye tournaments, and I'm even throwing in a Sturgeon Bay Open this year too. So.
Yeah, man, looking for a good year. So, talk a little bit about, growing up. Who were your mentors? How did you break into the pro walleye series? Some of that early stuff.
Yeah, as far as mentors, I mean, at first it was my dad. He was actually trained by kind of one of those legendary guides around Gull Lake and Brainerd. So he learned how to Lindy rig a leech or a crawler. And I remember that was the only thing we did until I was probably even 18 years old. Like, that was walleye fishing. And but he had been trained very well, so like I got pretty good at rigging early on in my life of fishing. And beyond that, as far as like, I guess I'd more call them peers or people I look up to, it's all my friends now in the industry. It's really cool. But Keith Cavaias, Gary Parsons, obviously the Linders, seeing all those people in the original like PWT days. I remember the first one in my memory was like Put-in Bay, Lake Erie, and these guys were going out in their aluminum boats and fishing Lake Erie, and then just seeing them bring in these 40-pound bags of 5 walleyes or what, and that's my first memory of televised walleye tournament angling. But ever since that day, I watched every single one of them, and it's kind of weird. It took me so long to finally fish them, but starting, I think it would be 7 years ago, my first event as a co-angler, like ever since then, looking back, it's like, man, I wish I would have started doing this 10 years earlier,
Yeah. So when was your first NWT as a pro?
Well, this would be my 4th season, so yeah, 3 years ago or whatever.
Yeah, and okay, so co-angler before then. Man, what is the NWT like for you? If you got a few years in as a co-angler, what was that like some of the guys that you maybe got in the boat with, what were some of those experiences? What did they think of you? Looking back on it, would you have wanted yourself now as a pro, as a co-angler then?
Back to I got into this late, so without sounding egotistical, yes, I would love to have myself as a co-angler, but that was the thing. Like, I was fishing all these muskie tournaments and then just fishing walleyes constantly, not any less than even probably some of the tournament pros, So when I started as a co-angler, I was already so detail orientated, in fishing, and I always got kind of the same reaction. Part of my reaction that I got was pretty funny because I was a gift from God. I was fortunate enough to be the co-angler with Corey Sprengel, Bill Shimoda, and Dustin Mankey. So whenever I jump in the boat with a pro, they'd be like, "Oh, have you pre-fished all this week? Who did you fish with?" And I'd be even bashful because from the very first pro I told that to, his head snapped over, and he's like, "Oh, well, you obviously know what's going on then." And it's almost like this awkward thing. There was some guys that are super professional, and they'd be like, "Right on, I don't have to worry about you, you're dialed in." And then there's some guys who would do this kind of little joke about, "Well, I can suggest what you should use, but I can't make you," and it's okay, well, that's not how co's and pros work. But regardless of that, I was, later told that I was having another pro in the boat. And that was a really important thing for me. Fishing as a co-angler was not only to get an idea of how the whole National Walleye Tour worked, but then also to kind of gauge myself against the pros that were fishing. So I got to fish with a number of different skill level pros, all the way up to Gary Parsons, Dave Anderson, Mark Kortz. And it was enough of a confidence builder for myself to know that I could hang at that level. So that's what the 2 years on the co-angler side did for me. It was a direct line to say, yes, you got to do this, It really made it really clear when Corey and Bill and Dustin said, "Hey, if you're going to go pro, are you going to be on our team?" And I was like, I got to do this now,
Yeah.
I don't care about whatever this boat loan for this Rangers, whatever it's going to cost. I'm figuring out this year I'm going pro.
Yeah, so questions like that don't come along for everybody all the time,
Right.
Yeah, that must have been a big deal. And so, I mean, you haven't been, 7 years co-angler pro. Obviously, haven't been doing this all your life. I mean, you came up, you probably had to get it. Did you go to college? Did you?
Yeah. Well, I only went to college for 2 years at NDSU. And then I had a classic scenario where I thought I was going to take a year off, and I was doing carpentry in the summer. And sure enough, by that third summer I did it, I was getting paid so much that, I actually had my eye on getting a boat. And I bought a fiberglass tiller boat, and then I have a boat payment, and my plan was just take a year off and make money. And then all of a sudden it started, turning into getting paid what a union carpenter does in the cities, and then more rods and reels. And it's just I joke with people and say, I quit college to pursue my lifelong goal of becoming a union carpenter, which it's a great profession. And at first when I was, when I'd seen my friends who were on the same level of me academically, when I had started seeing them getting to managerial positions at engineering firms and stuff like that, I was originally kind of sad and thought about going back to college. But now in hindsight, there was no other path that I could take that would allow me to take off the amount of time that I do and the freedom in my schedule. So, I mean, everything happens for a reason for myself, and that's a huge, obvious thing that happened in my life to where, now it's just I tell my boss, when I'm available. And, you really can't do that in a white collar job.
It's a big part of the fishing industry that's really hard to see because it's a melting pot. Everybody's different. And a lot of people in this business are full-time. Most aren't. A lot of guys have jobs. So if they're going to fish these tournaments, you got to take time off, and there's pre-fishing involved. Talk a little bit about what that's like for you. How much pre-fishing do you do? What does that depend on? And how is that for you?
Yeah, just to touch on that point, and that's something I've literally just learned in the last 3, 4, 5 years. But I think it's a really important part for especially younger kids who are coming up to realize that regardless of how somebody's viewed on social media, there's literally a handful of guys that are pure professional walleye fishermen. There's more of them on the bass side. It's just a product of the industry. It's a bigger industry, so more people can generate, it costs about $100,000 a year in expenses to fish, the Elite Series or even the FLW Series. So I think that's an important thing for people to realize, that even if a person looks like, that's all they do is fish. Some people kind of interpret themselves differently on social media. All those people have really good paying jobs, a lot of the older, baby boomer type age people. But we all have like ways to supplement our income. And then there's a transition phase, to get to that point where it is 100% fishing. But, I think one of the most basic of all models is the fact that, somebody guides full time and then fishes, say, at the National Walleye Tour. Or they have a small business that they own with 10 or 15 employees, and then they fish the National Walleye Tour. So that's one thing I learned behind the scenes, but I think it's cool to say, because, to think that somebody who has names on their jerseys of sponsors that they promote, to think that they're making $100,000 a year in promotional money, that's not really how it works. And it doesn't work that way for, I'm talking less than 10 people. So that's all worked for me, and now I'm making, that transition to more and more fishing-related income. But it's something I didn't know at all, before I really got behind the scenes. As far as pre-fish, obviously that's a different question, but I take off, 7 days before every tournament. So it's a week of pre-fish. Basically, everyone on the National Walleye Tour is on about that same schedule. So you're kind of at a disadvantage if you're shortened at all in that pre-fish. A lot of the lakes that we go to are, the Great Lakes, or the biggest lakes in the Midwest. And, it takes a good week to get a gist for, where the trophy level fish are, where the biggest fish are. And on that note too, a lot of us are kind of grouped up into teams where we share all our information. So for myself, my team now is Bill Shimoda, Dustin Mankey, and Dewey Jelm. And so we, have a meeting each night. We each go our separate ways in the morning, try different things, are constantly talking. And then when it's all said and done the night before the tournament, we share all our waypoints, go over all our notes together, and then come up with our plan of attack for the tournament day.
And then day of the tournament, you cut each other's throats.
Yeah, exactly.
You're trying to beat each other.
Yeah,
I think that's just a crazy thing, like if people that don't get a chance to experience that, just think about getting your best buddies, or even maybe you're not even all best buddies, but you just fish well together, and you go through so much, and then day of the tournament, you want the 5 biggest fish, and hopefully they do good, but I'll catch them instead. Yeah, I think it's cool to hear about that stuff, because absolutely, it's an interesting aspect of the industry. The network it's so important. The guys that are going to win consistently, or just do finish the top 10s, have that stuff on your resume. The network just seems really important, and I think just from what I've seen, to have the good networks, there's definitely a trend that the good guys, the trustworthy guys, have the networks, and and are the guys at the top. I think that's certainly true in the walleye industry. And talking about social media, absolutely something that we talk about here, and how people portray themselves. And social media is a really cool thing. Everybody's different on there, and even though today is our first time ever meeting, I've been following you for a little while. I got people that have put me onto you, and I absolutely love your Instagram. And the one of the coolest things about it, I think, and I, growing up where I grew up, I've always been, consider myself a real blue collar guy, just, I like that transparency, to a certain degree. Don't overshare, but just sharing that experience. And one thing about your social media that I think is the coolest is, you share the good and bad days.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I think we all look at social media differently. And for myself, I get, with my really close friends, we talk about some hilarious things, and it's like, there's humor. As I progress more and more, I realize that it's not natural for me to self-promote at all. It's just kind of the way I was brought up. So it actually really is a struggle for me to post a picture of myself holding a fish. But one of the things that I've been able to kind of break through from that is a lot of thanks to social media and Instagram, and having people interact and thanking you and then asking you questions. So for myself, it's really gotten me out of my shell of I don't want to brag that I have caught these fish. I'm super fortunate to be able to go to these places. I'm not looking for likes on my photos. Granted, everyone kind of sees that interaction and it's cool and gives you warm fuzzies and stuff. But, for me, my model is I made a kind of a business plan for myself, and that'd be like be the most visible guy on the National Walleye Tour. And that kind of started from an MPA conference where I heard a seminar topic, and it was from the guy who created Bass Blaster. And I looked around the room, and there's all my peers, all my competitors in this room, and he's telling like all the most juicy details of how to be successful in social media. I'm looking around, and then all these older, like kind of baby boomer type age group guys have this like confused look on their face. And that was the first time I really realized like I can excel at this because I know how to do it, and I know how to be entertaining on social media. So I'm going to use that to my advantage and try to create that. So it's really hard work. If I didn't have to do that, if I didn't get the reaction from friends and followers and stuff on social media, and even my family saying, hey, I saw those fish, and they comment, and they get to follow me so easily, and it's like this cool necessity of the fishing industry. If it wasn't a necessity, I would never post anything at all, and it would just be normal living where you're sharing those excited phone calls and stuff, with your friends, or text messages or pictures between your groups of friends or whatever. But yeah, it's really hard work for me to do. But it's people like even just, meeting you for the first time and saying that you've enjoyed some of that stuff is really what it keeps me going on it. And it makes it fun to just, document, like see something cool happen. Don't forget, grab your phone, video this, and put it on your Instagram story. So, like I said, the thing that keeps me going is like the interaction of all that.
Yeah, man. And if you're out there and you like fishing and you're not following Johnny Hoyer on Instagram, you're way too late to the party, so get on it. But another aspect of your game is your multi-species, and that's really our MO here. Jason's a multi-species guy, and we, you look at all these guys that we run into across the board when we're filming shows or whatever, the guys that are just good at one thing or great at one thing, there's definitely a home and a space for that in a guiding situation. But, I just never know what's going to be next on your Instagram. We're talking about, the last thing you were doing, you're on Lake Winnipeg fishing greenbacks, and then what next week you might be sitting there holding a bluegill or something with a spoolie reel. And it's like, you just never know. And I love that. But yet you're going to post the whole story. Maybe the first day was maybe a bit of a wash, or, it wasn't that great. Then you get out there, you wake up early and you go again the next day, and instead of just posting that one hero shot of that one big fish, and then, nobody really knows this story, it just kind of comes and goes on a news feed. But no, man, we definitely appreciate that about you. And I think that in this social media day and age, we could use a lot more of that, no doubt about it. So yeah, man, that's good stuff. How about when you're not fishing, if that's ever? What are you doing for fun?
Well, I like to stay pretty athletic. So, come summertime, those weeks at home are so rare that, really I like to schedule, maybe some volleyball with some friends, or, catch up with friends. And, inevitably it turns back into start thinking about the next walleye tour event. The other thing that I do when I'm home is I usually will schedule like half days of muskie fishing trips, for people to come out after work on Lake Minnetonka. I'm like 2 blocks from the landing out there. So, granted, back in the day, I'd fish every day. Now I know the lake well enough and kind of the patterns well enough that if I go out, one night or something, I got a pretty good idea what's going on. So I feel like it's money, well spent that I can guide somebody, for the next couple nights. But, a lot of my fun fishing is for bass too. And every time I go bass fishing, I really I could just go out and catch bass for fun. I know a couple of the lures that I could throw on Minnetonka and catch bass, but, I take in so much bass info, and a lot of it is A, potential sponsors, B, tournament strategies, timing, like really key things that they talk about a lot on like Bassmasters Live, on FLW Live. So I consume that stuff to get better at tournament fishing. And then I also consume it because I feel like at any point, since I don't care what I'm fishing for, I could easily be fishing a bass tournament that's worth, $80,000, a coast event or something like that. So, if it's down the road, maybe, but that's kind of my fun fishing is for bass, just another species.
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
readily
yeah.
available.
That would have been my next question. What's your, a question you probably get 50 times a day at these sports shows, but what do you like to fish, outside of walleyes? But I think it's cool for people to hear that because it's almost always the alternative fish to fish for a walleye fisherman is a bass. And I think that for people that are outside the industry looking in, I think that it would be a misconception maybe that wouldn't be the case, or that,
Right.
walleye fishermen are on one side and the bass fishermen on one side, but we fish with bass guys all the time for walleyes. And the walleye guys love to fish for bass. I think that's a really cool thing. Those stories go on and on.
Really too, you talk about other species. I mean, I wasted so many hours of my life muskie fishing, and I joke with my friends, like, I literally had a 10-day stretch of my life where I would sleep 5 hours a night. And I remember I'd drive around Lake Minnetonka after work, and I would be like almost falling asleep at the wheel. And I'd look out and I'd see the lake, and there'd be a south 10-mile-an-hour wind. And I would instantly start thinking like 5 spots. I'd probably have a fish on them, And by the time I'd get home, I would literally back up at an accelerated speed, hook up my boat. I would run upstairs, switch into shorts and flip-flops, eat something super fast, and be like to the landing fishing. And this was like almost falling asleep at the wheel. And I did that so many days in a row. And it has nothing to do with like me as a fisherman, but when I look at that, it's like that's how impressive a muskie is as a targeted species. I mean, to make somebody get that crazy, and like that's when I could physically do that and run on almost no sleep. And but the one thing that I got from muskies was like you learn to be so detail orientated. The little things that help you catch muskies consistently are just like they're almost make believe. Like they're such minuscule little details to catch or have another muskie bite in a day. When I was talking about bass, or we say walleye or trophy bluegills, like those little details that carry across all different species, and it's literally just practicing being detail orientated. So that's one thing that I've taken from muskies. The joke I say with my friends is if I didn't waste 10 years of my life muskie fishing, I could be on MLF bass right now. Like I don't think there's any way I wouldn't be on elite series bass.
Yeah, if you could put all those casts into another species of fish, you'd be sharing an apartment with Kevin Van Dam maybe.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, if you're willing to get out there and grind, that's what it can turn into. But yeah, that's a great story, and a lot of put in perspective. There's probably a lot of people out there driving past Minnetonka, and they're thinking, man, how nice would it be tonight? And then they go and they get under their covers and put their head on the pillow. Guys just gotta, when you see something, you gotta, if you want it, you better go take it.
Right.
Yeah, man. Yeah, cool, man. Well, any cool travel stories, man? You talk about, I know you guys travel for these tournaments, and I know there's some good stuff. I mean, somebody likes to eat something weird, or somebody likes to sleep backwards in bed. Like, what is it, man? What is it with you guys?
Oh man, our camp is so funny. I mean, if Dustin Mankey, if I could just do his social media for him, like that guy, there's so many funny things that happen in our walleye camp. Like between Dusty Mankey and all his isms, like, and then there's Bill Shimoda. I can't even think of any like specific stories, but it is literally nonstop laughter. I mean, maybe get serious for like 5 minutes and then just turns into screwing around again, So, man, you kind of put me on a spot there. I can't really think of like any specific ones, but I just instantly started smiling and laughing when he's brought that up, and that's just like the vibe in that camp. And that's the funnest part. I mean, you alluded to it too. Like, okay, now come tournament day, I hope all my partners catch them, but I hope that they have, a 1/10 of an ounce less than me, obviously, because we're all naturally competitive. But yeah, it's such a fun environment. And then our co-anglers that travel with us too, like, they're such assets. And I'm kind of funny because the co-anglers that travel with me, I'm like, hey, just to let you know, if you want to be successful in the tournament, one of the key things is to make like the best sandwich that your pro has ever seen in his life. Bring that to him. And in the same light, I'll be like, when I was a co-angler, I made sure that all the boats were clean, not just the pro I was fishing with, so like there's all this sarcasm going on at all times in camp, but it's just nonstop going after each other. It's funny.
Yeah, that's good stuff, man. That's good stuff. Yeah, man. Well, dude, I loved hearing your story. Thanks for your time. Let's plan on doing this again, though, man. This was really cool. It was great to meet you. I'm a big fan. And people can find you on Instagram and where else?
John Hoyer Fish on Instagram, and then my Facebook account is Hoyer Fishing.
Perfect, man. Perfect. Get out there. Everybody be a fan of John Hoyer. Thanks for your time, my man.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, everybody, for listening to this episode of the JMO Podcast. Let us know your thoughts down in the comments section. We enjoy your input, and we look at that stuff every day. And if there's anybody that you'd like to hear on a future episode, let us know.